Today's video is based off of my personal opinion, so absolutely no hate to anybody that is not included on this list, but I will point out one disclaimer. I am not going to be including active quarterbacks, so a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Matt Stafford, for example, or not Matt Stafford, but Matt Ryan won't actually be applicable to this list, so they're not going to apply to anything I'm about to say. But other than that, let's get right into it. Let's go. So today's topic is my top 5 quarterbacks in NFL history, and I will be giving one honorable mention. I would like to give my honorable mention to Dan Marino. There is only one reason he doesn't get this list, and that's strictly because I do believe the 5 quarterbacks ahead of him were better quarterbacks and better winners, better champions than Dan Marino ever was. Now, granted, Dan Marino is obviously number 6 of all time in my personal opinion, and I have nothing against Dan Marino. His game was great, and there was nothing against his stats or really even his accolades that prove otherwise. But these 5 people ahead of him just either have better stats and accolades combined or just, in my personal opinion, were better to their team. Coming in at number 5, and unfortunately I hate to say it because he was one of my favorites to watch, especially growing up throughout my teenage years, Drew Brees is going to come in at number 5. Now the problem with Drew Brees is he doesn't have any accolades and he only has one Super Bowl win. Now granted, a lot of people could look back at Drew Brees' career and say he should have won MVP a couple of seasons of, I think he had like 7 seasons of 5,000 passing yards or more. But the problem with Drew Brees is he only ever won one big game, and outside of that he is pretty much no accolades, and his stats go to back him up. I mean, if you just look at his stats, Drew Brees' career stats, the dude threw for a whopping 80,358 total yards with 571 touchdowns and 243 interceptions. I think what makes this even more immaculate about Drew Brees is the fact that he wasn't even a first overall pick or a first round pick, and yet he's still somehow, someway a top 5 quarterback of all time. Now, I know another person I'm going to name later in this list was drafted even way later than that, but it doesn't really matter. You can't take away from Drew Brees' excellence. The fact that this dude was drafted and played for 2 different teams and played at an excellent level for both teams just goes to show you exactly what type of product you want out of a quarterback when you were drafting it in the pick, your first round pick. But a lot of these quarterbacks don't turn out nearly as well as that, but that's not really the topic of this video. So let's just move on to the number 4 quarterback of all time. Now, coming in at number 4, I have a really old player that most of us haven't watched, but I have Johnny Unitas here. He is the definition of before the passing era. The guy was pretty much the pioneer for the passing game, especially back then. And if you look at his stats with 40,239 yards with a 54.6 completion percentage, was definitely not the best, but he's got 7.8 yards per attempt, 290 touchdowns, and 253 career interceptions, and again, that is not great. But if you also look at the 78.2 passer rating with a Super Bowl 5 champion and a 2-time NFL champion, so 3-time overall champion, 10-time Pro Bowler, and 3-time NFL MVP, he definitely has the accolades. He doesn't have the stats compared to the other guys, but again, he played back when a passing era really wasn't that great. And again, the interceptions do harm him, which is why he can't go any higher on this list. But again, those accolades just go to really back up a player. I don't even have film of Johnny Unitas. That's just how old he is. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to really put any film of him up here. But that is what it is. We're going to be moving on to number 3 right now. I don't even think I have to do much discussing with this one. My number 3 quarterback of all time is going to be Peyton Manning. I really do feel like Peyton Manning is pretty much, his nickname is the Sheriff, if that doesn't give you guys any idea of exactly what kind of player he was if you didn't watch him, or obviously most of you guys who have watched him are watching this video currently. And when it comes to Peyton Manning, we all know exactly who he is and the legacy defining player that he really truly is. And the problem with Peyton Manning, the only reason he can't be too much higher is that he always had his number. Somebody always had his number, whether it was Tom Brady or whether it was Joe Flacco, for an example. Somebody always had his number, and it just felt very like he couldn't win in the big games. And yes, he does have 2 Super Bowls, but that last Super Bowl, we can't pretend that anything flashy happened and that he was the reason that they won that game. We all know Von Miller won that Super Bowl MVP, and granted, that's a great way to go out for Peyton Manning. And obviously, I have him right up here in the top 3, so it's not really much discussion why I'm not calling him bad by any means. I'm just saying the other 2 players that are ahead of him are definitely worth more while and are definitely better players in my opinion. And if we look at his career stats, that Peyton Manning had 71,940 passing yards with a 65.3 completion percentage, 539 touchdowns to 251 interceptions, so a better than 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio with a 96.5 passer rating. As I already mentioned, a 2-time Super Bowl champion. But the thing that I really like about him is the fact that he is a 5-time NFL MVP player and 14-time Pro Bowler. That's crazy. I didn't know 14 times. And he's also won the NFL Offensive Player of the Year twice in his career. So without further ado, let's move on to number 2. I think you guys all know who's going to be number 2. And this is kind of where the list gets very, very spicy. It depends really what you want to call it. But again, I have this player just because of his winning ability up here in the top 2, and that is going to be Joe Montana. I really do feel like we need to sit back and discuss how great Joe Montana truly was, especially when we look at the fact that Steve Young was getting benched for Joe Montana. And we all know how great Steve Young is, another, maybe top 25 quarterback of all time. But the fact that Steve Young was getting not benched, but he wouldn't start over Joe Montana just shows exactly how great Joe Montana was. And if we look at Joe Montana's career stats, the dude had only 40,551 yards, and I say only because that's nothing compared to what we just mentioned with Peyton Manning or Drew Brees and what we're going to mention with the next player. But he had a 63.2 completion percentage with 7.5 yards per attempt, 273 touchdowns, and 139 interceptions. Again, that's a really, really good rate to throw touchdowns to interceptions. That's not that bad at all. He has a 92.3 passer rating, and he is a 4-time Super Bowl champion, a 3-time Super Bowl MVP, an 8-time Pro Bowler, a 2-time MVP, and one NFL Offensive Player of the Year. And I just think that we need to understand how great those accolades are. If you just look in retrospect, yes, he didn't have the numbers of a Peyton Manning, but he has 2 times as many Super Bowls. And yes, that 49ers team was much better than some of the teams that Peyton Manning had. But again, we got to look at this as just this player. And Joe Montana, in my opinion, has a better resume than Peyton Manning. And that's exactly why he's my number 2. I think we all know exactly who's coming at the number 1 spot. It's going to be my best friend, the GOAT, Eli Manning. I feel like Eli Manning doesn't get enough respect, and he definitely deserves his number 1 spot. Nah, I'm just playing. But for real, Eli Manning deserves some more respect. Top 15 quarterback of all time. If you think otherwise, you're funny. But anyway, going into the number 1 slot, we already know exactly who this was going to be. This is going to be Tom the GOAT Brady. Now, Tom Brady in his career, I'm just going to rattle off some stats. He has thrown for 89,214 career passing yards. So that's playoff and postseason combined. That's just wild. Like, nobody's going to touch that record for so long. And yes, you Patrick Mahomes stands think so. I don't care. Right? We're not talking about Patrick Mahomes. We are talking about the GOAT, Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes is not going to pass Tom Brady until he can win 7 championships. And until you can prove me otherwise, I don't want to hear it. And you just got to look at these stats. So as I already mentioned, the 89,000 passing yards, but he also threw for 649 touchdowns to 212 interceptions. It's a 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. You are crazy if you don't think that's incredible. That is one of the best marks that we've seen out of a longevity-wise quarterback. Maybe Aaron Rodgers is up there. I haven't really looked at his stats, so I'm not 100% positive. But if you look at it, it's just crazy to look at Tom Brady. Obviously, he's a 7-time Super Bowl winning champion. What else do you need to know about Tom Brady? So we also know that he spent 23 years in the league, retiring once, coming back out of retirement, and then claiming to go back into retirement again this year. Don't know whether that's true, but I'm only making this video based off the assumption that he is staying retired. As I said, a 7-time Super Bowl champion, but a 5-time Super Bowl MVP. The only 2 times he didn't win it were when Julian Edelman won it. I can't remember who won the other one. Yeah, I really can't just remember. I'm kind of blanking on it. But he's got 3 MVPs, 2 Offensive Player of the Years, which is kind of funny to look at because he's one of the only players to win MVP and Offensive Player of the Year, and he did it twice in 2007 and 2010. He also won Comeback Player of the Year after his ACL injury, which we all know exactly what happened there. He's a 3 times first team All-Pro, 3 times second team All-Pro. He's been to 15 Pro Bowls. He's a 5-time NFL passing touchdowns leader. He's been named to 2 different All-Decades team, being the 2000 and 2010s. That he holds so many records. I don't even know if I want to talk about all the records he holds. I might just put them right up here on screen just so you guys can understand exactly what type of player Tom Brady truly was. And whether you like Tom Brady or not, you have to admit that this dude might be the greatest quarterback we've ever witnessed. Might be the greatest NFL player we ever witnessed, but that's a different video I will talk about later on. I do appreciate you guys so much for making it to the end of my video. If you're not already, click subscribe and watch my previous video. And I want to know your guys' opinions. Who do you think your top 5 QBs are? I'm not here to judge anything, and whether you like my opinion or not, it's your opinion, and I want to talk to you guys about it below in the comments. So comment below your top 5. But that's going to be it. Peace. Love y'all.